The knock came at 11:17 on a Tuesday night. I knew the exact time because I had just finished sweeping the last pile of sawdust into the dustpan, my eyes on the old clock on my workshop wall. Its ticking was a familiar heartbeat in the quiet garage, a rhythm that measured out my solitary life. Rain was hammering against the corrugated roof, a relentless drumming that usually soothed me, but tonight it just felt like an accomplice to the cold that had settled deep in my bones. A cold that had nothing to do with the weather. I froze, dustpan in hand. Nobody knocked on my door this late. Nobody knocked on my door much at all, unless it was a courier with a package of specialty wood I'd overspent on, or my daughter's elementary school calling about a scraped knee. My world was small, meticulously contained within the four walls of this workshop and the small two-bedroom house it was attached to. It was a world of wood grain, the scent of pine and glue, the hum of the lathe, and the gentle breathing of my 7-year-old daughter, Maya, sleeping soundly in her room. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. A tremor of unease went through me. I set the dustpan down, my boots scuffing softly on the concrete floor. Through the small, grimy window of the garage door, I could see the blinding white headlights of a car I didn't recognize. A sleek, black sedan that looked like it cost more than my entire house. It sat in my gravel driveway like a panther that had wandered into a petting zoo. Out of place. Dangerous. A weight settled in my stomach. It was the same weight that lived there most days, the one composed of overdue bills and the ever-present fear of not being enough. Enough from Maya. Enough to keep this roof over our heads. My freelance carpentry work was steady, but it was a constant hustle. One bad month, one expensive truck repair, like the one I was currently putting off, and the whole fragile structure of our life could come tumbling down. My mind immediately went to the worst-case scenario. A debt collector who'd finally tracked down my home address. I wiped my dusty hands on my jeans and walked through the connecting door into my house, the sudden warmth and the smell of leftover spaghetti a stark contrast to the damp chill of the garage. I peered through the peephole. A figure stood on my small porch, silhouetted by the porch light, an umbrella held against the downpour. All I could make out was a sharp, tailored suit, definitely not a friendly neighbor. My jaw tightened. I took a deep breath, braced myself for a confrontation, and opened the door a crack, leaving the security chain in place. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. The figure lowered the umbrella slightly. It was a woman. And not just any woman. My heart did a strange, painful lurch, a mix of shock and pure, unadulterated panic. It was Isabella Vance. Isabella Vance. The CEO. The client. The woman whose colossal, modernist mansion I'd been working in for the past 3 months, installing custom floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in a library the size of my entire ground floor. I knew her from the architectural plans, from the clipped, impersonal emails sent by her assistant, and from the few times I'd seen her striding through her own home, her heels clicking on the marble floors like military-grade weaponry. She was always on the phone, her voice a low, commanding hum, her eyes focused on a point 1,000 yards away. She was an intimidating presence, an arctic force of nature in a steel and glass world. And she was standing on my porch. "Mr. Morales?" Her voice was exactly as I remembered it, crisp, cool, and utterly devoid of fluff. She didn't seem to notice the security chain, or if she did, she deemed it irrelevant. "Leo," I corrected automatically, my brain struggling to catch up. "Yes, that's me. Is something wrong at the house? With the library?" My mind raced. Had a shelf collapsed? Did the stain not match her ridiculously specific swatch? "No, the library is fine," she said, dismissing my life's work of the last quarter year with a flick of her wrist. "There is another matter, an emergency. My head of security gave me your address. He said you were the best, and the most discreet." Discreet. That was me. The guy who kept his head down, did the work, and tried to be invisible. Apparently, I'd succeeded a little too well. An emergency? What kind? She glanced past me into the hallway, her gaze sharp and assessing, taking in the scuffed baseboards and the crayon drawing of a unicorn Maya had taped to the wall. I felt a hot flush of shame climb my neck. My home, my sanctuary, suddenly felt shabby and small under her billionaire gaze. "A pipe has burst in the west wing, near my suite. It's flooding the dressing room. My regular maintenance crew is an hour away, and, frankly, I don't trust them not to sell photos of my underwear drawer to the tabloids." There wasn't a hint of humor in her voice. It was a simple statement of fact. I blinked. "You want me to fix a pipe?" "You're a carpenter, Mr. Morales. You build things. I'm told you're good with your hands and good at solving problems. This is a problem. I need it solved. I will, of course, compensate you for your time at a rate that will make it worth your while." The unspoken message was clear. Name your price, just get over here. The weight in my stomach twisted. The money, the truck repair, the bill for Maya's dental appointment sitting on the counter. I should have said no. It was late, Maya was sleeping, and this was so far outside my job description, it was laughable. But the word compensate echoed in the empty spaces of my bank account. "My daughter is asleep," I said, the words feeling like a weak excuse even to my own ears. "I see," she said, and for the first time a flicker of something other than command entered her eyes. It wasn't sympathy, not exactly, more like consideration, a problem being factored into an equation. "How old is she?" 7. "Is there anyone who can watch her?" I almost laughed. My world was Maya and my workshop. My parents were in Florida, and my ex-wife, well, she wasn't an option. "No, there's no one." She was silent for a long moment, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm on her umbrella. I expected her to sigh, to dismiss me, and move on to the next name on her list. Instead, she said, "Then bring her." I stared at her. "Bring her? To your house? It's almost midnight." "I have a dozen empty bedrooms, Mr. Morales. I'm sure one of them is quiet enough for a 7-year-old to sleep in. The car is warm. I'll wait." She didn't frame it as a question. It was a solution. Decisive. Final. And that's how I found myself, 20 minutes later, carrying my sleeping daughter, wrapped in her favorite unicorn blanket, out to a gleaming black car that smelled of leather and quiet wealth. I placed her gently in the back, buckling her in. As I slid into the passenger seat, Isabella Vance glanced at me, her face illuminated by the dashboard lights. "Thank you," she said, and the words sounded strange in her mouth, like a foreign language she was just learning. I just nodded, my heart pounding a nervous, unsteady rhythm against my ribs. I felt like I'd been plucked from my life and dropped into a different reality, one where CEOs showed up at your door in the middle of the night and you drove through the rain to fix their plumbing. The weight in my head felt heavier than ever, a dizzying mix of fear and a strange, unwelcome flicker of something else, something I couldn't name. The drive to her estate was silent and tense. I stared out the window at the rain-slicked streets, my own reflection a ghostly, tired-looking stranger superimposed over the blurred lights of the city. I felt profoundly out of my element. My work clothes, smelling faintly of sawdust and sweat, seemed to profane the pristine leather interior of her car. I was acutely aware of the dirt under my fingernails, the wear on my boots. I was the help, a blue-collar guy being chauffeured by a titan of industry to fix her toilet. The absurdity of it was almost too much to handle. When we arrived, the gates to her property swung open silently, like a dragon opening its maw. The house was less a home and more a monument to modern architecture, all sharp angles, vast expanses of glass, and cold, imposing stone. It was magnificent, but it had all the warmth of a surgical theater. I'd worked here for months, but always during the day with a crew, the noise of saws and sanders filling the cavernous spaces. At night, it was different. Silent, eerily so. Isabella led me through the house, her steps echoing in the grand foyer. "I'll have my housekeeper prepare a room for your daughter," she said, her voice low. "She can stay right next to my suite, so you'll be close by." I hesitated, clutching Maya a little tighter. The thought of leaving her alone in this strange, enormous place, even for a minute, made my skin crawl. "She's fine with me. She sleeps through anything." Isabella looked at the small, blanket-wrapped bundle in my arms, and for a fleeting second, the Ice Queen facade seemed to melt. A softness, so subtle I almost missed it, touched the corners of her mouth. "All right, follow me." She led me up a floating staircase that probably cost more than my entire education, and down a long, white hallway. The west wing was as sterile as the rest of the house, but the scent of expensive perfume hung in the air. We passed a home gym, a yoga studio, and finally stopped before a set of double doors. "My suite is through there," she said, pointing. "The dressing room is just to the left. The water is coming from under the vanity." I nodded, shifting Maya's weight. "Okay, I'll need to set her down somewhere." "Use the sitting room," she said, gesturing to an adjacent room. "The couch is comfortable." I walked into the sitting room, which was larger than my living room and dining room combined. A massive, cream-colored sofa sat before a cold, black fireplace. I gently laid Maya down, tucking the unicorn blanket around her. She mumbled something in her sleep and snuggled deeper into the plush cushions, oblivious. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her, a fierce, protective love swelling in my chest. She was the anchor in my drifting life, the one pure, good thing. "I'll get my tools," I said quietly, turning back to Isabella. She was watching me. Not me, exactly, but me watching Maya. Her expression was unreadable, a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. "They're in the hall where you left them. I'll be in my office. Let me know when you've assessed the damage." She turned and walked away without another word, her posture ramrod straight. I retrieved my toolbox and entered the dressing room. It was more like a high-end boutique than a closet. Racks of designer clothes, shelves of shoes, a glass case of watches, and a significant puddle of water spreading across the gleaming hardwood floor. I located the source quickly, a corroded connection on the hot water line under a marble vanity. It was a simple fix, but messy. I shut off the main valve and got to work, losing myself in the familiar mechanics of the job. The feel of the wrench in my hand, the precise turn of the fittings, the quiet satisfaction of making something broken whole again. It was my therapy. An hour later, I had replaced the faulty pipe and was just tightening the final connection. The water was cleaned up, and the immediate crisis was averted. I was on my knees, my back to the door, absorbed in the task. That's when I heard the soft click of a door opening behind me. I didn't think anything of it, assuming it was Isabella coming to check on my progress. I was about to say I was almost finished when a faint scent of lavender and steam washed over me. "Is it done?" Her voice was softer, closer than I expected. I started to turn, to stand up and answer her. "Almost. Just securing the new—" My words died in my throat. My brain short-circuited. She was standing not 10 feet away, by the entrance to what must have been her master bathroom. She hadn't come from the hallway. She had come from the shower. and she was wearing nothing but a towel. It was wrapped around her torso, but she was in the middle of drying her hair with another, her arms raised. The movement caused the towel to shift, revealing the long, elegant line of her thigh, the gentle curve of her hip. Her skin, flushed from the heat of the shower, seemed to glow in the soft light of the dressing room. Her hair, usually pinned in a severe, perfect bun, was down, dark and damp around her shoulders. The Ice Queen was gone. In her place was just a woman. A vulnerable, unguarded, beautiful woman. For one frozen second, my eyes took it all in. The slope of her neck, the droplets of water on her collarbone. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, wild drumbeat. And then a wave of something hot and shameful washed over me. I wasn't supposed to see this. This wasn't for me. This was a private moment I had intruded upon, a sacred space I had defiled with my presence. I snapped my gaze away so fast my neck muscles protested. My eyes locked onto the brass fitting in my hand, as if it were the most fascinating object in the universe. Heat flooded my face, a deep, burning crimson I could feel all the way to the tips of my ears. "Excuse me, ma'am," I mumbled to the floor, my voice thick. I didn't dare look up. I turned my body away, presenting her with my back, creating a physical wall between us. I felt like a trespasser, a creep. I fumbled with my wrench, my hands suddenly clumsy and useless. I just wanted to disappear into the floorboards. The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched for an eternity, filled only by the frantic pounding of my own pulse in my ears. I could feel her presence behind me, could feel her eyes on my back. I expected anger. I expected a sharp, cutting remark, an order to get out. I expected to be fired, not just from this bizarre late-night plumbing job, but from the library project, too. My career, what little of it there was, flashed before my eyes. But the anger never came. Instead, after what felt like a lifetime, I heard a soft rustle of fabric. Then her voice, startlingly close and quiet. "Leo." She used my first name. I flinched, my shoulders hunching. I still didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," I said, the words coming out in a rush. "I didn't hear you come in. I'll be done in just a minute. I'm so sorry." "Look at me." It wasn't a command, not like before. It was a request. Soft, but with an underlying steel that made it impossible to refuse. Slowly, reluctantly, I pushed myself to my feet. I kept my eyes down, fixed on the scuffed toes of my work boots. I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on me. "Leo." I finally forced myself to lift my head. She was standing in the same spot, but she'd pulled a silk robe from a hook on the door and wrapped it tightly around herself, clutching the lapels together at her throat. The flush was gone from her skin, replaced by a pale, almost fragile translucence. Her eyes, usually so sharp and guarded, were wide and something else, something I couldn't decipher. It wasn't anger. It wasn't embarrassment. It was something deeper, more complex. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. My brow furrowed in confusion. For what? I should be the one apologizing. "For looking away," she clarified. Her gaze was intense, searching. "For your professionalism." The word hung in the air between us. Professionalism. It sounded clinical, cold, but her tone was anything but. It was laced with a strange sort of wonder, as if she'd just witnessed a rare and unexpected phenomenon. I didn't know what to say. I had just reacted. I hadn't thought about it. In my world, you didn't stare at a woman in a towel. You just didn't. It was basic human decency. The idea that she was thanking me for it felt sad. What kind of life did she lead where a simple act of respect was so noteworthy? It was nothing, I mumbled, looking down at my hands, which I was now wringing like a dish rag. I'll just finish up. No, she said quickly. It's fine. It can wait. Come. She turned and walked out of the dressing room, her bare feet silent on the floor. I'll make you some coffee. I stood there for a moment, bewildered, the wrench still dangling from my hand. The world had tilted on its axis. Isabella Vance, the untouchable CEO, had just offered to make me, the carpenter, a cup of coffee. After I'd seen her half naked. Nothing made sense anymore. I gathered my tools, my movements slow and deliberate, my mind reeling. I glanced back at the sitting room, where Maya was still sleeping peacefully, a small, warm spot of normalcy in this bizarre, surreal night. Then I followed Isabella Vance into the lion's den, or, in this case, her kitchen. Her kitchen was an industrial marvel of stainless steel and black granite. It was immaculate, looking as if no one had ever actually cooked in it. She moved with an unfamiliar hesitation, opening and closing cabinets as if she were searching for something in a stranger's house. It was a jarring contrast to the decisive, powerful woman I was used to seeing. She finally located a bag of coffee beans and a grinder. The loud whir of the machine filled the cavernous room, a jarring intrusion into the silence. I stood awkwardly by the island, feeling like a giant in a dollhouse, despite the room's massive scale. I didn't know where to put my hands. I shoved them in my pockets. You should sit, she said, not looking at me as she measured out the coffee grounds. I perched on the edge of a tall stool that probably cost more than my dining room set. The silence stretched again, but it was different now. Less tense, more thoughtful. I watched her as she worked the complex-looking espresso machine. Her movements were precise, but there was a tremor in her hands that she couldn't quite conceal. The Ice Queen was gone, and the woman who remained looked fragile. She looked tired. Utterly, bone-deep exhausted, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. She placed a steaming mug in front of me. It was a simple, plain white mug, a surprising choice amidst all the opulence. Thank you, I said again, my voice quiet. I wrapped my calloused hands around the warm ceramic, the heat a welcome comfort. She made one for herself and leaned against the counter opposite me, cradling the mug in both hands. She didn't sip from it. She just stared down into the dark liquid as if searching for answers. It's been a long week, she said, her voice so low I almost didn't catch it. It wasn't an explanation. It was a confession. And in that moment, all the intimidation I felt, all the awkwardness and the feeling of being out of my depth, it all just evaporated. I wasn't looking at Isabella Vance, CEO of Vance Industries, a woman with a net worth that could probably buy a small country. I was looking at a person who was at the end of her rope, and I knew that feeling. I lived with that feeling. I get it, I said, and the words were simple, but they were true. Her head snapped up, her eyes meeting mine. There was surprise in them. You do? I nodded, taking a sip of the coffee. It was strong and bitter, but good. Some weeks feel like they last a month. You just try to keep your head above water until Friday and hope nothing else breaks before then. I thought of my truck's transmission, the bill on my counter. Yeah, I got it. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. It was a sad, tired thing, but it was genuine. It transformed her face, softening the sharp lines and warming the cool gray of her eyes. Today, something else broke. She gestured vaguely in the direction of her suite. Literally. I allowed myself a small smile in return. Well, that part's fixed at least. We fell silent again, but this time it was comfortable, companionable. We just drank our coffee, two strangers sharing a moment of quiet understanding in the middle of the night. The power dynamic had completely inverted. Here, in her sterile kitchen, surrounded by a wealth I couldn't comprehend, she was the one who seemed lost, and I, for some inexplicable reason, felt grounded. My ex-husband, she said suddenly, her voice flat, would have made a joke. I looked at her, confused. What? If he had been in your position, she clarified, her gaze distant. Back in the dressing room, he would have smirked. He would have made a crass, belittling joke. Something to make me feel small, to remind me that he could still get to me. She paused, her grip tightening on her mug. Every man I have dated since our divorce, they would have stared. They would have seen it as an opportunity, a prize. She finally looked at me, her eyes searching my face with a raw, unnerving intensity. You didn't do either of those things. You gave me my dignity. You looked away. The weight of her words settled on me. I finally understood the magnitude of what had happened. It wasn't about the towel. It was about what my reaction represented. In a world where men either wanted to control her or possess her, I had simply respected her. I hadn't treated her like a title, or a body, or an opportunity. I had treated her like a person. I didn't think, I said honestly. I have a daughter. I hope if she's ever in a situation like that, someone would have the decency to look away too. Her expression softened completely. The last wall of ice crumbled, and for the first time, I saw the real Isabella Vance. And she was just a woman, carrying a burden that was far too heavy. Her shoulders slumped as if she was holding herself together by sheer force of will, and in that moment, I felt a powerful, unfamiliar urge. It was an instinct to protect, to shield this incredibly strong woman from whatever it was that made her look so broken. She finished her coffee and placed the mug in the sink with a soft clink. There's a charity gala on Saturday, she said, the change of subject so abrupt it gave me whiplash. The CEO was back, but her voice was different, softer. The annual foundation benefit. It's a significant event for my company. Okay, I said, unsure where this was going. My ex-husband will be there, she continued, her voice hardening slightly. Julian. He makes a point of attending every year, usually with a model half his age on his arm. It's a performance, all for the press and the board members. I nodded slowly, beginning to see the outline of a very bad idea forming. I require an escort, she said, turning to face me fully. Her chin was up, her posture straight again, but her eyes held a plea that contradicted her powerful stance. I cannot go alone. It would be seen as a weakness, and I cannot take a business associate. That would fuel other kinds of rumors. I need a neutral party, someone believable, someone decent. My stomach dropped. Oh no, no way. I need to hire you, Leo, she said, her voice firm. Not as a carpenter. I want to hire you to be my date for the gala. I stared at her, speechless. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the ridiculously expensive refrigerator. The proposition was so far beyond the realm of my reality that I couldn't even process it. Me? At a gala? With her? It was the plot of a movie I would never watch. You're kidding, I finally managed to say, the words coming out as a choked laugh. I am not kidding, she said, her expression deadly serious. I am prepared to offer you $20,000 for one evening. The laughter died in my throat. $20,000. The number just hung there in the air, shimmering. It was a life-altering amount of money for me. It wasn't just the truck repair. It was the debt my ex-wife had left me with. It was a college fund for Maya. It was security. It was the ability to breathe for the first time in years. And all I had to do was wear a suit and stand next to her for a few hours. My mind was a whirlwind of protest. It was insane. I didn't belong in her world. I would make a fool of myself and of her. People would see right through it. I was a carpenter. I had sawdust in my hair and calluses on my hands. I didn't know which fork to use. "I can't," I said, shaking my head. I'm not that guy. I don't know how to act in those places. I'll ruin your evening." "I don't need that guy," she countered, taking a step closer. "I've had that guy. That guy is Julian. That guy is every man who wants something from me. I need you, Leo, because you want nothing from me. You proved that tonight." Her gaze was unwavering. "I'll handle everything, the suit, the arrangements. All you have to do is show up and be yourself." Be myself. The guy who gets flustered and apologizes for existing. The guy who feels more comfortable with a piece of sandpaper than a person. It was a terrible plan. But then my mind flashed to Maya, sleeping peacefully on the ridiculously expensive couch in the other room. I thought of the worry that gnawed at me every single night as I tried to sleep. The fear that I was one unlucky break away from losing everything. $20,000 could buy a lot of peace of mind. It could buy a future. "Why me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "There have to be 100 other options." "Because," she said softly, her eyes holding mine, "you're the only one who saw me tonight. And you didn't try to take advantage of it. You just fixed the pipe." The weight in my chest shifted. The fear was still there, but it was joined by something else. A sense of purpose. A feeling that this absurd, insane proposition was about more than just money. It was about helping this woman who, for some reason, saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. I took a deep breath, the scent of coffee and rain filling my lungs. "Okay," I said, the word feeling both like a surrender and a victory. "Okay, I'll do it." The 2 days leading up to the gala were a surreal blur. Isabella was ruthlessly efficient. A tailor who looked like he belonged on a Milan runway showed up at my workshop the next afternoon, taking my measurements with a quiet, judgmental reverence. He didn't say a word about the sawdust on the floor, but his perfectly polished shoes seemed to scream their disapproval. Isabella had called it a fitting, but it felt more like being processed for entry into another species. Then came the rehearsal dinner. She had a 5-star meal delivered to her cold, cavernous dining room. We sat at opposite ends of a table that could have seated 20, the acres of polished mahogany between us feeling like a vast, empty battlefield. The purpose was to align our narratives, as she put it. We were supposed to invent a story of how we met, a plausible fiction to feed to the sharks at the gala. "We could say we met through a mutual friend," she suggested, pushing a piece of sea bass around her plate. "I don't think we have any mutual friends," I said, stating the obvious. "My friends install drywall and argue about football." She looked up, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "A fair point. What about an art gallery? I was admiring a piece. You offered an interesting perspective on the woodwork of the frame." It sounded so contrived, so utterly phony. "I don't go to art galleries," I said, "and the only perspective I have on frames is whether they're made of pine or oak." A genuine laugh escaped her, a surprising, lovely sound that echoed in the silent room. "You're not making this easy, Leo." It's not an easy thing to lie about, I countered, feeling a bit bolder. The best lies are close to the truth. I paused, thinking. What if we just didn't? What if we're just vague? If anyone asks, we just say we met recently and leave it at that. She considered this, tapping a perfectly manicured nail against her wine glass. They'll dig. Julian, especially. He'll want details. He'll want leverage. So let him dig, I said. There's nothing to find. The conversation shifted then. The pretense of planning fell away and we just talked. I asked her why she stayed in this house, a place that seemed more like a museum than a home. She spoke of her father, the company's founder, and the immense pressure she felt to live up to his legacy, a legacy that was tied to this very property. It was the first time she'd ever spoken of her family with anything other than professional reverence. I saw the weight of it on her shoulders, the burden of being the daughter of a legend. She asked me about carpentry, not in a polite, condescending way, but with genuine curiosity. I told her about the first thing I ever built, a clumsy, lopsided birdhouse for my mom when I was 10. I told her about the satisfaction of taking a raw piece of wood and shaping it into something beautiful and functional. I told her about Maya, how her laughter was the best sound in the world, how my entire life was oriented around that small, bright sun. As I spoke, I watched her face. The CEO mask was gone completely. She was just listening, her eyes soft and focused. At one point, her hand, which had been resting on the table, drifted slightly towards mine. I saw the movement, a small, unconscious gesture, and my own hand twitched, wanting to meet hers halfway. But then she seemed to catch herself, pulling back, her fingers curling into a fist. The rules of our arrangement, unspoken but rigid, snapped back into place. I was an employee. This was a transaction. My heart gave a small, stupid pang of disappointment. The night of the gala, a black tuxedo arrived at my house in a garment bag that was probably worth more than the suit I already owned. When I put it on, I barely recognized the man in the mirror. The cheap fabric of my usual life had been replaced by fine wool and silk. I looked respectable, but I felt like an imposter, a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. When Isabella's car arrived, I walked out to meet it. She was in the back seat. The door opened and my breath caught in my chest. She was wearing a deep sapphire gown that shimmered under the porch light. It was elegant and understated, but on her, it was devastating. Her hair was swept up in a graceful twist, and a simple diamond necklace glittered at her throat. She was, without a doubt, the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. "You look," I started, but the words failed me. "Wow." A faint blush touched her cheeks. "You clean up well yourself, Mr. Morales." "Leo," I corrected softly. "Leo," she repeated, and the way she said my name sent a shiver down my spine. The gala was everything I had feared it would be, a glittering, overwhelming sea of wealth and power. We walked into a ballroom dripping with chandeliers and the sound of clinking champagne glasses and forced laughter. All eyes turned to us, or rather, to Isabella, and then, with sharp, assessing curiosity, to me. I felt like a bug under a microscope. I could feel them sizing me up, calculating my worth, and finding me wanting. My hand, which Isabella had instructed me to place on the small of her back, felt clumsy and huge. "Just breathe," she murmured, her voice a warm whisper against my ear. "And don't lock your knees." We navigated the room, Isabella greeting people with a cool, polished grace. I was her silent, handsome shadow, the man of mystery. It was almost comical. And then I saw him. Across the room, holding a flute of champagne, was a man who could only be Julian Croft. He was handsome in a slick, predatory way, with a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. He was talking to a state senator, but his gaze was fixed on us, on Isabella, and on my hand on her back. He excused himself and began to make his way toward us, moving through the crowd like a shark sensing blood in the water. Isabella's back stiffened under my hand. I could feel the tension radiating from her. "Here we go," she muttered under her breath. "Isabella, darling," Julian purred as he reached us, his eyes flicking over her dress before dismissing it and landing on me. He looked me up and down, a slow, insulting appraisal. "You look, well, and you've brought a new project with you." His smile was pure condescension. "Julian," Isabella said, her voice like ice. "This is Leo Morales. Leo, this is Julian Croft." I extended a hand. "Mr. Croft." He ignored it, his eyes still fixed on me. "Morales. Don't know the name. What do you do, Morales? Hedge funds? Private equity? Or did she just find you on a yacht?" The insult was designed to sting, to position me as another one of her paid-for trinkets. I could feel Isabella bristle beside me, ready to leap to my defense. But in that moment, something inside me settled. The fear I'd been carrying all night vanished, replaced by a strange, quiet calm. This man wasn't intimidating. He was just a bully. A pathetic, insecure bully trying to score points. I let my hand drop. I met his smug gaze without flinching. "I'm a carpenter," I said, my voice even and clear. The simple, unadorned truth of it hung in the air. Julian actually blinked, thrown off balance. It was not the answer he expected. He had been hoping for something I would be ashamed of, something he could use. But I wasn't ashamed. It was who I was. He recovered quickly, a nasty smirk spreading across his face. "A carpenter? How rustic. Isabella, darling, your tastes have become so wonderfully quaint. Does he build you little birdhouses?" Isabella took a sharp breath, her fingers digging into my arm. But before she could speak, I did. "I build things," I said, my voice still quiet but carrying a weight that cut through the surrounding chatter. I looked directly into Julian's cold eyes. "Strong things. Things that last." The words were simple, but they were filled with the conviction of my life's work. They were a statement of my values, of my very being. In that moment, I wasn't just a carpenter. I was a man who created, who made things of substance and integrity. And in the face of this man who only knew how to tear things down, my simple profession suddenly felt like a superpower. A flicker of genuine surprise, then annoyance, crossed Julian's face. He had no response. My simple, honest dignity had completely disarmed him. He opened his mouth, then closed it, looking for a moment like a fish out of water. He gave a tight, dismissive nod and turned away, muttering something about needing a refill. He was gone. The tension immediately drained out of Isabella. She turned to me, her eyes wide with something I could only describe as awe. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For what?" I asked, my heart still beating a little faster than normal. "For that," she said, her gaze searching my face. "You didn't get angry. You didn't back down. You just were." She placed her hand over mine on her back, her fingers lacing with mine. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. It wasn't part of the act anymore. It was real. In that moment, standing in the middle of a glittering ballroom, surrounded by people I had nothing in common with, I had somehow managed to protect the most powerful woman I had ever met. And she was looking at me not as an employee, not as a prop, but as her partner, as her equal. We were a united front, and for the first time all night, I felt like I truly belonged there, right by her side. The rest of the gala passed in a haze. We danced one slow, obligatory dance, and for those 3 minutes, the world fell away. I held her in my arms, her head resting lightly on my shoulder, the scent of her perfume filling my senses. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The space between us was charged with a new, potent energy. The lines of our business arrangement had blurred into non-existence. This was something else entirely, something terrifying and wonderful. A few days later, my world had returned to its normal, quiet rhythm, but everything felt different. The workshop was the same, the scent of wood was the same, but I was changed. The memory of the gala, of Isabella's hand in mine, of the look in her eyes after I'd faced down Julian, it was all branded onto my mind. The $20,000 had appeared in my bank account, a silent, staggering confirmation that it had all been real. I paid off the most pressing debts and set aside the rest, the feeling of relief so profound it was almost dizzying. But the money wasn't what occupied my thoughts. It was her. I hadn't heard from her since the night of the gala. Our contract was fulfilled. The transaction was complete, and the silence she left behind was a hollow ache in my chest. I told myself it was for the best. We were from different universes, a carpenter and a CEO. It was a ridiculous fantasy. But the thought of never seeing her again, never hearing that surprisingly soft laugh, was unbearable. I was in the garage, sanding the edge of a custom mantelpiece, when I heard a car pull into my driveway. My heart gave a hopeful, stupid leap. I told myself it was just a client, but when I looked out the window, I saw the familiar black sedan. And then she was standing in the open doorway of my workshop, a stark silhouette against the bright afternoon sun. She wasn't wearing a power suit or a ball gown. She was in a pair of simple, dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, and flat shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wore no makeup. She looked younger, softer, and completely out of place amidst the sawdust and stacked lumber. She also looked lost. "Hi," she said, her voice small. "Hi," I replied, my own voice hoarse. I turned off the sander, the sudden silence roaring in my ears. I wiped my hands on a rag, suddenly conscious of the fine layer of dust covering everything, including me. "I was just driving," she said, her eyes darting around the workshop, taking in the tools hanging on the pegboard, the half-finished projects, the faint smell of varnish. "I ended up here." It wasn't an explanation, but I understood. Her sterile, empty mansion wasn't a home. It was a cage. She had come here, to my messy, real, lived-in world, seeking something. Just then, the door from the house squeaked open, and Maya ran in, her face bright. "Daddy, can we have mac and cheese for dinner?" She stopped short when she saw Isabella, her eyes wide. "Maya, honey, this is a friend of mine." "Isabella," I said, my voice gentle. "Isabella, this is my daughter, Maya." Isabella knelt, bringing herself down to Maya's level. The gesture was so natural, so unaffected, it took my breath away. "It's very nice to meet you, Maya. I love mac and cheese." Maya, usually shy with strangers, gave a small, hesitant smile. "Me too. My daddy makes the best. He puts extra cheese in it." "I'll bet he does," Isabella said, her eyes flicking up to meet mine, and in that look, I saw a universe of longing. A longing for this, for the simple, messy, beautiful reality of a home, of a family. I made them both mac and cheese. We sat at my small, slightly wobbly kitchen table. Isabella ate like she was starving, not for food, but for the experience. She watched as I helped Maya cut her food, as Maya told a long, rambling story about a caterpillar she found at school. She watched us with a quiet, heartbreaking intensity. After dinner, while Maya was in the living room watching a cartoon, Isabella and I stood by the sink, the warm, soapy water covering our hands as we washed the dishes together.
"He was right, you know,"
she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the plate she was rinsing. "Who?"
"Julian,"
she said, her voice barely a whisper.
"What he implied. That I just buy people. That I use them. It's what I did with you."
Her voice broke on the last word, and a single tear traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away.
"I was scared and I was weak. And I used your decency and a checkbook to solve my problem. I'm so sorry, Leo."
My heart broke for her. All this time she'd been carrying this guilt. "Isabella, look at me." I gently took the plate from her hands and turned her to face me. I cupped her face in my hands, my rough, calloused thumbs wiping away her tears. Her skin was so soft.
"You didn't use me. You gave me an opportunity. But that's not what this is about. Not anymore."
"But
No,"
I interrupted softly.
"You listen to me. What I'm afraid of, what I've been afraid of since the moment you left after the gala, is that I'm not enough for you. I'm a carpenter, Izzy."
The nickname slipped out, feeling as natural as breathing.
"I live in this tiny house. My hands are rough and I have sawdust in my hair most of the time. I can't give you a world of galas and private jets and mansions."
I took a shaky breath, laying my own soul bare.
"I'm terrified that once this fantasy is over, you'll disappear from my life. And the thought of that? It's worse than any debt or broken down truck. Because losing you would actually break me."
Her eyes, shimmering with unshed tears, searched mine. She saw the truth there, the raw, terrifying, beautiful truth.
"You idiot,"
she whispered, a watery smile breaking through her tears.
"Don't you get it? I don't want that world. I am suffocating in that world."
She placed her hands over mine, pressing my palms against her cheeks.
"Your world, this house, your workshop, the way you are with your daughter, the way you build things that are strong and real and last. Leo, that's all I've ever wanted."
The space between us disappeared. All the doubts, all the insecurities, all the differences in our bank accounts and our social standing, they all melted away into nothing. There was only us. Two people who had seen the truth of each other. I lowered my head and kissed her. It wasn't a hesitant, questioning kiss. It was a kiss of certainty, of coming home. It was a kiss that sealed the end of a transaction and the beginning of everything. Her lips were soft and yielding under mine, and she kissed me back with a desperate, pent-up longing that matched my own. It was a confession, a promise, and a prayer all at once. When we finally broke apart, we rested our foreheads together, breathing the same air.
"This is real,"
I whispered, more to myself than to her.
"Yes,"
she breathed back, her eyes fluttering open.
"Let's build this, Leo. Together."
In the weeks that followed, we began to do just that. We built something new, something quiet and strong. Julian Croft tried one last desperate gambit, leaking a story to a gossip blog that insinuated I was a paid escort. But we faced it together. We didn't hide. Isabella issued a simple, dignified statement. "Leo Morales is a kind and honorable man who I am proud to have in my life. Our relationship is a private matter." The story died almost as soon as it appeared. Julian's pettiness had backfired, making him look like a bitter, rejected ex. He was neutralized, a ghost from a past that no longer had any power over her. The contract, the $20,000, It all felt like a lifetime ago. It was the strange, unbelievable catalyst that had brought us together, but it wasn't our foundation. Our foundation was built on late-night conversations in my kitchen, on walks in the park with Maya, on the comfortable silence we could share in my workshop as I worked and she read a book, content just to be near me. She started spending more time at my house than at her own. Her laughter became a common sound, mingling with Maya's. She taught Maya how to play chess. She helped me fix the leaky faucet in my bathroom, her brow furrowed in concentration as I explained how the gaskets worked. She was slowly, carefully, integrating herself into our little world, and our world was expanding to make room for her. One Saturday morning, I was in the workshop, putting the finishing touches on the mantelpiece. The smell of lemon oil and fresh-cut oak filled the air. Isabella came in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She was wearing one of my old, paint-splattered sweatshirts. It was miles too big for her, but she had never looked more beautiful. She handed me a mug and leaned against my workbench, watching me work. "The contract is over," I said quietly, polishing the wood until it gleamed. "The money's in the bank. The deal is done." "I know," she said, her voice soft. I set down my rag and turned to face her, my heart beating a steady, confident rhythm. "But I don't want this to be over," I said, my gaze holding hers. "I want to build something real with you, Izzy. Something that lasts." A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face, a smile that reached her eyes and made them shine. "I want that too, Leo. More than anything." I stood there for a long moment, looking at this incredible woman who had crashed into my life on a rainy Tuesday night. I looked down at my hands, the hands of a carpenter. For so long I had thought they were only good for shaping wood, for fixing what was broken. I had felt so average, so stuck in the quiet desperation of my circumstances. But she had seen something else in them. She had seen strength, integrity, the ability to build. That crazy, impossible night felt like a dream, but it was the single best thing that had ever happened to me. It had led me here, to this moment, to this woman, to this feeling of profound, unshakable belonging. It had set me on a path I never could have imagined, a path that led not just out of debt, but out of the loneliness I had accepted as my lot in life. I reached out and took her hand, lacing my calloused fingers with hers. Her hand felt small and delicate in mine, but I knew the strength it held. We were from different worlds, yes, but we had found common ground. We had found home in each other. Looking at her, with the morning sun streaming through the dusty workshop window and the smell of sawdust in the air, I knew this was just the beginning. This was the start of our new chapter. We would build our life the same way I built everything else, with patience, with honesty, and with the unwavering conviction that we were creating something strong, something real, something meant to last.